Well, good morning. We're really glad you're here. Hopefully, your experience so far has been a really good one as we've gotten worship started and as we get to open God's Word together. Really excited that you're here. I said this first service is still true. I got some extra juice this morning. I'm really excited about this passage and this message, and so I'm normally pretty energetic, but I got a little extra this morning, and so I'm pretty pumped up. I'm glad that you're here. If you're new today, we're in the series we've been in called over the last several weeks called "What Kind of Man Is This?" It's looking at these qualities that Jesus has that we ask this question, like what kind of person, what kind of man would have these things? And we looked at all these different traits so far. We've looked at the fact that he's kind, and we've looked at the fact that he's gracious. We've looked at all these things. Today we're going to look at one that's a little different. Today's is what kind of man is rugged like Jesus? Now, rugged is an interesting word. We automatically, when I say the word rugged, we build up some kind of picture that we have in our mind. I'll share this story. So 2 years ago, this fall, I bought my first truck that I've ever owned. And I had a bunch of men, a lot of them from this church, some of you sitting in this room, who came up to me after that, and they were like, "Welcome to manhood, sir." And I'm like, what? Okay. And then I actually had one guy, bumped into him at the grocery store, and he was like, he had pulled his wallet out, and he opened his wallet and pulled a card out, and it was a man card. And he said, "I thought you should have this." And I was like, dude, all I did was buy a truck. But here's what's crazy. I got the truck, and then I started saying stuff that was weird. I'm like, this is the best car I've ever had. I'm never driving anything the rest of my life but a truck. I have a Ford, and I have an F-150. And one day I was at a gas station, and they had a built Ford Tough hat on it. And I'm like, should I buy this? I'm like, what kind of person am I? This is crazy, right? Here's the thing. Trucks resemble something in manhood that apparently it makes us feel more rugged. Right? It's this look, it's this feel that we feel more rugged when we drive rugged things. Built Ford Tough. Chevy's old one, like a rock. Like these tough images that we get with trucks are something that we kind of create. And so what happens is that culturally, when we think rugged, we think things along that line. Right? Like we build this up to be this kind of this picture of things that we wear, pictures of these things that we look like, these ways that we act, these jobs we have. And as we think about ruggedness, this is kind of what happens. In fact, we've done this in our own culture. So I want to put a couple pictures up for you this morning. One of them is an ad campaign for a paper towel company called Brawny, and y'all know this one, the Brawny Man. This is the Brawny Man. Here's what he's meant to look like. He's meant to look rugged. He's meant to look tough. He's meant to look like that because then they're like, our paper towels are as tough as our Brawny guy, right? And so what is he? He's wearing flannel. He's out in the woods, in the wilderness. He has a beard. All these things make him look rugged. And so what is it supposed to communicate? Is that this is what ruggedness is. Ruggedness is this picture. I actually asked ChatGPT this week, right? I was like, let's see what AI does. I asked him, I said, hey, will you show me a picture of somebody, I didn't say male or female, who is rugged, and this is what I got, right? Now, it's a guy, he's got, rugged clothes on. He looks mean, scouring face. He's got cuts on his face. He looks like he's been doing rugged activities. And so this is what, and this, I didn't specify male or female. This is what, here's what's happened. A lot of times what we do when we classify ruggedness is we say ruggedness is about men. It's a thing that men are meant to possess. Men are meant to be rugged. Men are meant to have these traits that make them this way. But when we look biblically, if we're going to model Christ, it's not just about men. I would say there's a lot of women who are rugged. In fact, there's a lot of women in here who are more rugged than any man that's any man that's ever lived in the world. I, as a proud father of 3 girls, have watched my wife give birth 3 times, and I can tell you, right? Like my wife is more rugged than I ever could be by going through that. Like there's a picture that we have to change our way of understanding and of seeing what ruggedness is meant. So here's what I want to do this morning is I want to take off our cultural glasses and I want to put on some new lenses for us to see a picture of what ruggedness really looks like and what it really means. And that we would be able to open up the page of Scripture. We'd be able to look at the story and the life of Jesus. And when we see it, we say, man, what kind of man is rugged like this? Let me define rugged for us this morning. Here's how we're going to define rugged. Rugged is this. It is having or requiring toughness or determination. Now, that is not a man thing. That is not a woman thing. That is not a kid thing. That's not a grown-up thing. That is a everybody thing. If we were going to define somebody who classifies ruggedness, we would say it's this. And I'm going to take out the or requiring, right? When we look at Jesus, I take that part out. He has toughness and determination. Therefore, the model for all of us in the room is that would be the way that we would live our life, is having toughness and determination, not just physically, but in all different arenas and areas of our life. When we think oftentimes of Jesus, we think that he was a rugged guy. He was a carpenter. He did things with his hands. He was outside a lot, right? He could have been the poster child of the brawny ad. Like, that's just him. He was that way. That was the culture. That was his way of living. And we think that that's what makes him rugged. That's not what makes him rugged. What I want to do this morning is I want to showcase out of the gospel accounts 3 different pictures we get and arenas where we see the ruggedness of Jesus, where we see this way that he went about living and how he showcased ruggedness, not just in his physical state, but in these other places. That it was more than just something that he did, it was something that he was. In hopes then that we would say, if that's how Jesus is living, man, then let me model my life in the same exact way. We're going to be in the gospel accounts this morning. We're going to look at a handful of different stories. Now, we're not going to be in one passage. If you've got a Bible and you want to go there, one of the ones we're going to read is Mark chapter 14. In Mark 14, what we're going to find is it begins this story of really the last days of Jesus' life. We're going to look at the last little bit of time that Jesus has on earth. And really what we want to do is those days showcases some things about Jesus that are true all throughout the Gospels, but the end of his life, I think, is the greatest way for us to maybe see some of these things on display. So Mark chapter 14, you got a Bible, we're going to go there here in a minute. 3 arenas this morning. Number 1 is this, is that Jesus was rugged in the crowd. He was rugged in the crowd. What we know about the story and about the life of Christ is that there is this moment at the end of his life, as we get into Mark 14, where Jesus has been out praying in the garden with his disciples. We're going to actually look at that story here in just a few minutes. But as he is leaving that, he gets captured, he gets taken hostage, and then he gets led back into Jerusalem, and he goes into town. And as he gets led back, he gets taken to this council. This council of people, it's essentially he gets taken to a court case, and they're going to try Jesus on the charges that he is guilty of being a false prophet, that he is claiming to be the Messiah, but he's not actually the Messiah. He claims to be the Son of God, but he's not actually the Son of God. They claim that these things are true, are what he's doing, when in actuality, he's innocent because he is all of those things. But he goes to this trial, and he gets into this room, and I want to read for you the way that this story goes. And as I read, you're going to see some things that we'll notice. I'm not going to put the verses on the screen. I just want you to hear it this morning or follow along. It's Mark 14. We're going to get started in verse 53. But as we do that, you'll see, here are some of the clips that we'll see from this passage that are pretty striking. All right? Here's how it goes. Mark 14, start verse 53. They led Jesus to the high priest. And all of the chief priests and the elders and the scribes, they all came together. And Peter had followed him at a distance right into the courtyard of the high priest. And as he was sitting with the guards and warming himself by the fire. Now the chief priests and the whole council, now that's about 40 to 50 men, they take Jesus into a room, and it's only that group that's in the room. This is not in front of, his disciples are not in there, his followers are not in there. It's about 40, 50 people that are this group, right, that he talks about, the chief priests and the council, and then it's Jesus. He's by himself amidst this group of people, this crowd that is in opposition of him. And here's how it goes. They were seeking testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but they found none. For many bore false witness against him, but their testimony didn't agree. Some stood up and bore false witness against him, saying, "We heard him say that I will destroy this temple that is made with hands, and in 3 days I will build another, not made with hands." Yet even about this, their testimony did not agree. And the high priest stood up in the midst, and he asked Jesus, "Have you no answer to make? What is it that these men testify against you?" Listen to what he does. But he remained silent, and he made no answer. And again, the high priest asked him, "Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed?" And Jesus said, "I am. And you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming with the clouds of heaven." And the high priest tore his garments and said, "What further witnesses do we need? You have heard his blasphemy. What is your decision?" And they all condemned him as deserving death. And some began to spit on him, cover his face, and strike him, saying to him, "Prophesy." And the guards received him with blows. All right, now look, as you see on the screen behind us, here are just all these little snapshots. But here's a couple things that have happened. They bring him in, and they're proclaiming false testimony about him as a way of coming against him. Now listen, if you've ever been accused of something that you did not do, what is the immediate response? No, that's not what happened. No, that's not what happened, right? Like in every single way, we become very defensive of ourselves. Jesus does not. He does not become defensive. In fact, what it tells us is that when he's given the opportunity to be defensive, he keeps his mouth shut. The question is like, why? Like, why would he do this? Is it a symbol of his weakness, his silence? No, it's a symbol of his strength. Look, do you know how hard it is, how much discipline it takes to not say things sometimes? Man, somebody says something to you and you're like, yeah, wait till I get my words in, right? That is not a symbol of strength, and we feel like it is. We feel like the way to be strong in our world is when somebody says something to me is I say something back. And it's like, boom, and you flex on a moment and you feel strong. That's not strength. Jesus showcases strength. When he has a moment to defend himself, when he can say things, when he can accuse, he can curse down this group of men for these false accusations, he doesn't do it. And the reason I believe he doesn't do it is because Jesus has something in his mind that he knows. He knows what the will of God is. He knows that he has to be found guilty. And he knows what God wants for him, what his purpose has been. And so therefore he keeps his mouth shut because he knows by keeping his mouth shut, he stays in line with the will of God. The will of God was the cross for Jesus. And he knows that he has to be accused in this moment. He knew this was going to happen. And in the midst of the crowd creating and evoking this type of doctrine against him, these accusations against him that are not true, what does he do rather than try to defend himself? Can I just say this too also about Jesus? Like, Jesus is the most wise, eloquent, elegant communicator that the world has ever seen. If Jesus wanted to talk his way out of anything, he had the ability and the power to do so. He was unbelievably wise. And this would have been easy. I mean, they don't even agree on their testimony. They can't even get on the same page about it. Jesus very easily could have said things that would have just poked a hole in all these different things that are going on. And yet what does he do is he keeps his mouth shut and he keeps his eyes fixed on the will of God. His heart in this moment is about being obedient to God. Can I just say this? Every one of us in this room is put in positions where the crowd feels like it's against us. I mean, keep in mind in this story, right? Like Jesus, not only is this group of people that are high power people, they hold a lot of authority in the town. They're all saying things about him. If there was any time in his life to maybe speak up, this was it, and he doesn't do it. He doesn't go on his defense. And meanwhile, while he's not going on his defense, his best friend Peter, one of his chief disciples, you know what he's out in the court doing by the fire? He's denying that he ever knew Jesus. He's denying that he was even around him. So while Jesus is facing public backstabbing, public backturning from chief leaders and all these people, he's also getting denied. His best friend is basically claiming that he has no interest in him. He has no relationship with him. Look, there is so many times where we in our life are surrounded by the crowd. And here is what I would just say this, and I say this lovingly, is that as a community of faith, I think oftentimes we are super, super weak in the crowd. People start saying stuff about us that challenges our faith, and immediately we start to slip. We slide away from what we know to be true. We slide away from what we believe is God's will for my life, for God's path for my life, and we begin to speak and talk and act in certain ways. And so you come here to church, and it's cool, but then you go to work, and you're in an environment where it feels like it's 20-1. Caleb, I'm the only guy in my office. I'm the only woman in my office that actually trusts Jesus and that has faith. And so when I get there, it's hard for me not to just kind of put my faith to the side and just jump into the crowd with everybody else. We just lose sight of our faith. What is the model for us? Well, the model is the way of Christ. Look at what Jesus did in the hardest days of his life, knowing that his conviction would lead to his death. And yet what does he do? He doesn't chase it. He doesn't eloquently speak it. He doesn't put words to it. He doesn't defend it. He doesn't get angry. He gets silent. And he stays obedient. And he stays in line and in step with the will of God. Look, a lot of times we talk about crowds. I work like right now a lot with teenagers, right? Teenagers are notorious. And I say this lovingly because I love teenagers. Teenagers are notorious for when the crowd gets revved up, they will drop everything they believe about faith. It's one of the things that we talk about all the time is listen, as you are walking this journey of life, you're going to face moments when the crowd is walking a totally different way. And what we try to challenge teenagers with is to stay true to who God is, even when you feel alone, even when your friends backstab you, even when the whole crowd is doing one thing and saying one thing, that you would keep your feet on solid ground. It's something we talk to teenagers about all the time. It's how do we live by faith in a world where the crowd doesn't want to live by faith. But can I say this? Like, this issue is not just for teenagers. This is an issue for all of us. I mean, adults are bad at it too. It's that we say that we proclaim certain truths and things about our life, about we align with God. We want to be obedient to the way of Jesus. And then the minute that like something comes up or we're in a crowd where that's not the popular thing, we just walk away from the things that we knew to be true. Our faith gets weak. Listen, what we find with Jesus is that Jesus had this posture that even in the midst of the crowds, and look, this is not just something that happened at the end of his life, it's something that happened all throughout his ministry. Everywhere he went, he got public backlash. Everywhere he went, people would curse his name and they would speak down to him and they would say that he was wrong and all this type of stuff. And every single time, what did he do is he held his footing and he stuck his foot in the ground. He said, this is the way, this is the will of my Father. Like what made Jesus so rugged was his obedience in the crowds. His faith and his trust and his dependence and his obedience, even when the crowds were surrounding him and he felt like I'm the only one. He never, ever wavered. And it's a beautiful picture of his ruggedness. But the second way that we see Jesus' ruggedness is this, is that we see that Jesus was rugged in the chaos. He was rugged in the chaos. Hey, many of you have walked into the room this morning and you feel like you are living in a season of chaos. Parenting, dude, it's chaotic. I just can't get a grip on how to raise these kids and they're acting out, they're doing this and just feels chaotic. My job is so chaotic. I just feel like I can't get my head above water. I can't seem to catch up. It feels like every time I go to work, I've got more and more and more to do and I'm stressed and I don't know how to do this and so I can't keep up. School is really hard. I feel like I'm way behind and I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do and so I'm chasing grades and it's not working and all these different things are happening. Financially, just feels chaotic. Feels like in the midst of this season of my life right now, it's like I'd never have enough money. I can never make it work. And it feels like sometimes we just enter into these arenas and these seasons where it just feels like all of our life can feel very chaotic. Circumstantially, it just feels intense. We get surrounded. There's a moment where Jesus is in the garden and this is the story right before he goes to the court case, and Jesus goes to the garden. And as he's in the garden, what he does is it's in the midst of a chaotic season for him. He knows what's coming, but yet there's this moment of stillness. There's this moment of peace where as he is in the garden, he's praying, and the disciples are over here supposed to be praying as well. They fall asleep. Typical disciples, right? And Jesus goes and he prays and he's having this prayer with God and he knows that what is coming is Jerusalem. He knows that what is coming is the cross. And he begins to pray. And in fact, in his prayer, this is what he prays. God, if there is any other way, would you take this cup from me? God, would you just find a different way? Man, I just wonder how many times I know in my own life I have prayed this prayer. God, this season of my life is too hard. Could you just find another way for me? God, is there any other way that this could happen? Is there any other way that my life could work out? Is there any other way that your will could be played out in my life? Is there anything else that you could do for me? God, please, would you give me another way? Please, would you remove this hardship from me? Would you remove this financial struggle from me, the marital issues from me, the relationship with my kids from me, the relationship with my friends from me, the loneliness at school from me? Would you just remove this cup from me, this struggle that I have myself in? We are all used to praying this prayer. It is not anything different. It is very much the humanness of what Jesus was walking through that offered this prayer. But here's what's fascinating. Where we see the ruggedness of Jesus is the next words he says. He says, nevertheless, let your will be done. Nevertheless. Hey, despite all of my circumstances, despite anything that I'm walking through, let it be your will that is done in my life. Even if all these things don't work out, even if the circumstances never get fixed and repaired, let your will be done. That's the picture of rugged faith. To say my circumstances don't define me like my obedience to the will of God does. My willingness to stay in line with what God wants for my life, that's what signifies and defines who I am. That's what ruggedness looks like, right? It's not a fake posture, it's a heart posture of saying, this is where I'll be and this is the way that I'll walk. We had the Daniel series several months ago. In the Daniel series, you remember the story, if you were here, of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. It's these three guys. And they grow up with this king Nebuchadnezzar, this wicked king. And this king basically tells everybody, if you're going to live in my kingdom, you will bow down to the king, the God that I worship. So he goes, these three guys who are members of the people of God, right? They're from the family of God. These three guys, they basically go to king and they're like, we're not doing it. And he's like, fine, I'm throwing you in the fire. So they take him to this fiery furnace. They put it up to full blaze, and then they put it up even hotter than that. And they begin to get them, and they throw them in the fire. And before they get thrown in the fire, here's what they say. They say, "O king, our God will rescue us from the fire. But even if he doesn't, we will never bow down to your way." It's the same prayer we see, and we see Jesus embody this same heart, kind of amplifies it. God, is there another way? God, I trust you. I know that there's got to be another way. Can you give me another way? But even if you don't, you let your will be done. I will continue to walk after you. I wonder this morning, how many of us can maybe say that that's where we're at? Right? Like, how many of us can actually put like those words to our steps to say, you know what? Like, I actually really do believe that God's way is best. I really believe that God is the Father, that God is Savior, that God is King. I really believe that his way is better for my life. And if you're here this morning and you're like, yeah, but like when life is hard, I'd rather just do things my own way. I'd rather just chase my own mind, my own heart, my own ability. And you're like, Caleb, what's the better? Like, why would I do that? Why would I choose God's way when I can just get myself out of it? I can talk my way out of struggle. I can talk my way out of these issues. Why would I not choose that way? Can I tell you why? Here's why. It's because what you get by trusting in Jesus and by walking in step with him is that there is peace that comes over you that is like a river. The Bible says it's like a river that flows in the midst of our walking in struggle. You're like, dude, I'm walking in chaos, but I'm trusting in God and I'm leaning in him. You know what comes? Peace comes. Peace like a river that flows into our life. And can I tell you what chasing your own your own things will do? Being like, I'm strong enough, big enough, tough enough, smart enough, cool enough, whatever, to do things my own way. You know what happens when you do that? You are led consistently astray time and time and time again. And you are left thirsty and thirsty and thirsty and thirsty, never getting satisfied. And yet what happens is that even though circumstances get really difficult and they're really tough, when I choose to be obedient, when I choose to align my life to have the mental and the physical toughness to say, I will choose my faith in God even when it's really hard, even when I don't want to, even when I'm like, you know what, I'll wait until this season of my life ends and then I'll add God into my life. But I say, nah, man, in the midst of my circumstances, I'm going to stay obedient to the will of God. When that's what I choose, I am met with peace, that even if my circumstances never end, I have peace that God is in control, that God is working all things out for good. That's what I rest in. And I just think that's what's being offered to us, is that when Jesus is in this position of chaos, when he's praying these things, this is what we find. But here's what's fascinating. The story goes on in the garden, and here's what we read. This is Luke chapter 22, verses 50 and 51. This is Jesus in the garden. It says this: things get chaotic in this moment. One of them, this is Peter, he struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his right ear. But Jesus said, no more of this, and he touched his ear and healed him. Here's what happens, right? Like, this is a pretty fascinating thing. Jesus is in the garden, the disciples fall asleep, he goes, the guards go, and they take a hold of Jesus. And Peter, being who Peter is, the bold, brash version of Peter, he takes a sword out of the belt of one of the guards and he cuts off the ear of one of the servants. And if you're watching this like a movie, right? Like if we watch this in a movie, we see these types of things, this is where we get excited. And we're like, come on, Peter, atta boy. That's what we want, right? We're all team Jesus and we're like, yeah, let's rally. Like that's what we're about. We get excited because we're like, this is the way out. We're watching this whole story play out. Jesus prophesying about what's coming, that he's going to have to die, that he's going to go to the cross. And in the story, we look and we find this is the way out. Peter and the disciples have created a way out for Jesus. They cut off the ear. They have a sword. They're now in control. And so now it's like, dude, if it's a TV show or a movie, it's like Peter and Jesus can escape, flee the the country, go live on the beach, fish, and hang out and just be boys for the rest of their life. What a life. That was the way out. But yet, look at what Jesus does. He says, no more of this. And not only does he say no more of this, but he picks up the ear and he heals the man who's coming to take him and lead him to his death. He heals him. That's a sermon for another day. But where we see the ruggedness of Jesus is that he's so determined and obedient and willing to stay true to what God had called him to do. God had created him, had sent him as a human, right? Like Jesus is sent as a human to earth for the very purpose of going to the cross. Anything else would have been outside of God's will. And so what does Jesus do? He says, no more of this. No more. No more responding this way. No more cutting off the ears of my enemy. In fact, I'm going to heal the ear of my enemy before I go and take on the cross. What gives him the strength to do it is that he is obedient. He showcases this ruggedness and his ability that when chaotic situations and circumstances come about me, I will not be moved and I will not waver. I will stay true to the path and to the place that God has ultimately called me to go. A couple weeks ago, we looked at the story of Stephen. He was the first martyr in the Bible. He was killed for his faith. In fact, it said that because of the stances that he made in his life, people wanted to kill him. And so they took him into a public place and they threw rocks at him. They threw stones at him until he died. And it tells us, though, the end of the account of the picture of Stephen is that it says this, is that his face looked like an angel. That there was this thing that had happened to him. You know what I think had happened to him is that in walking in obedience amidst really hard circumstances, he felt a peace that was more than anything that this life could give him. That this presence of God in his life, the presence of the Holy Spirit in his life had now filled his life, and it gave him this peace that even in the midst of hardship, he could smile. He had this face that was peaceful even when circumstances were hard. This is what God gives us. He gives us peace in the midst of our circumstances, in the midst of our chaos. The last one is this, is that Jesus was rugged on the cross. This one's easy, right? This is the physical thing that Jesus went through. And so what I want to do is I just want to tell you a little bit of what he did. Some of you may know, some of you may not. So here's ultimately what Jesus went through physically on our behalf. And if you're here and you're like, I only see ruggedness as physical. All right, if that's what's going to connect you to Christ, then see this, okay? Here's what Jesus went through. Jesus, after the trial that we first looked at, he is led to Pontius Pilate's house. At that house, he is given his sentence. Now, he's been convicted of guilty, but he's given this sentence. And the sentence was that he would be crucified. Now, crucifixion was the most painful and the most tumultuous death you could face physically, maybe of all time, right? It's just unbelievably physical, and it's a long period of physical endurance that you would have to go through. Here's what happened. He's convicted, and he's given the punishment that he would be crucified. He's then led out into a courtyard around in Pontius's house, right on the outside of his house, and he's strapped to a pole. His hands wrapped around a pole, his hands shackled to the pole, and the guards, the Roman guards that were there to do their job, essentially what they do is they do something called scourging him. He was scourged. Now, if you want to read about this, you can see it in John 19, and Matthew 27 is the account. But what scourging was they took this whip. It was a leather whip, and on the end of it, it had it's called the cat of nine tails. It had 9 different strands of leather. And at the end of each piece of leather was bone and rock and glass and metal and all these things that would have been sharp and that would have punctured the skin. And then what the guards would do is while he is strapped and he is helpless, is that they would take that whip and they would stripe it across his back. And those cat of nine tails, those 9 tails would stick into the flesh. And every time they would pull that whip out, it would rip pieces of flesh out with it. And he did it over and over and over and over, 39 different times. The Bible tells us that he got hit by that way 39 times. Back absolutely just ripped to shreds. And then after that, they said, here's what you're going to do. You're not just going to be scourged, but now you're going to carry your cross to the place where we're going to hang you on it. So they place the cross on his back, and he begins to walk through town. Now, the journey is about half a mile. It's called the Via Dolorosa. That's the journey that Jesus went on from that court up to the place in Golgotha, which is the hill that he died on. And as he went up that hill, you think, oh, it's only half a mile. It wasn't that far. It was straight uphill. It was a journey that that was like lots of twists and turns, very hard physically anyway, not to mention with a cross on a back that had just been ripped to shreds. And as he journeys up the Via Dolorosa and he gets to the very top, he gets to the top of Golgotha, and then they lay the cross down, they lay him across it, they drive nails in his hands and his feet, and they hang him in front of people to be mocked, to be spit on, to be made fun of. They take a crown of thorns and they press it into his skull where blood begins to pour from his skull, and he hangs there for 6 hours fighting physically on behalf of every single person in this room and every single person who's ever been created. He did it for every single one. And while it is a picture of his love, it is a deep picture of his ruggedness. But I want to say this morning, right? Like, we see this and it should move us. I mean, the fact that Jesus did this should move us. It should shape thoughts that we have, the way that we look at Christ, the way that we think about Jesus. It should do something to us. But here's the thing. We look at this and we say, man, what a physical thing Jesus is. Jesus is physically rugged. This is not a picture of his physicality. It is not a picture of how physically gifted he was. He didn't have different flesh than you have. He has the same flesh. Do you know what allowed him? Do you know what kept him on the cross? His love for you and his willingness to be obedient to Christ, even to the point of death. He was so concerned with being committed to the will of God. It is what drove him. And there was a mental thing that Jesus had in his mind that he had fixated, that the will of God is the most important thing that I could possibly be committed to. And if it means the cross, if it means being scourged, if it means carrying my cross up a hard journey, if it means hanging on a tree with nails in my hands and feet for 6 hours until I pass, if that's what it means, if that is what God is calling me to, then I will walk that road every single time. It was a mental disposition. It was a mental decision because of a heart that longed for God. Like if we walk away and we say, I just need to get more physically tough. No, you don't. This is not a picture of his mentality, right? Rugged faith is seen in the physical. It is seen in the social. It is seen in the chaos. It is built in the mind. By having a mind that has been transformed because of something that God has done in our heart. Look, when my heart longs for God, when I've accepted God's gift, when I know what he has done for me, when I'm moved because of what the gospel tells me that he died for me, then it changes my heart, and then ultimately it changes my mind, and my mindset says, I don't care if it's in front of the crowds, I don't care if it's in the chaos, I don't care if physically I have to go through something, I will not come off of being obedient and faithful to my Savior, my Creator, and my God in heaven. I won't move from it. That's what it looks like to have rugged faith. Listen, if you want to be defined by ruggedness, don't let it be because you do something. Let it be because of something that you are. Let it be because of something that's in your heart and in your mind. Let it be because, like Paul talks about in Romans 12, because your mind has been transformed away from the things of the world and into these new things. Let that be what builds us and what determines the ruggedness of who we are. There's a verse in Luke 9. I love this verse, and I love this picture that we get of Jesus. Luke 9, this is actually before all of these things have gone on. Luke 9, he's been in ministry out in an area called Galilee. That's outside of Jerusalem. And he comes back. He's leaving Galilee, and he's heading back to go to Jerusalem. And he knows what awaits him in Jerusalem, right? He knows what is there for him. What is awaiting for him in Jerusalem is his death. It is the crucifixion. It is backstabbing. It is betrayal. It is a bunch of things that nobody wants to walk through. No human in the world would choose that as his path. And here's what Luke 9:51 tells us. I love this picture. It says this: when the days drew near for him to be taken up, Jesus, to be taken up, to be accused, to be convicted, all these things, to be taken up. That's the picture. Here's what it says. He set his face to go to Jerusalem. It was like even after everything that he knew was going to happen, he knew what was going to be waiting for him, and it says he set his face. He put it as a purpose to say, this is where I'm going. My eyes are fixed on it. My body will walk in motion. My mind is fixed. My heart is fixed. He set his face. The NIV, so this is in the ESV. The NIV translation reads it like this, is that he resolutely set out for Jerusalem. That resolute idea. So just let me boil it down to this. I love this picture. We're going to put those two together to say it like this, is that Jesus resolutely set his face for Jerusalem. And here's what this means, is that Jesus had that the affections and that the desires of his heart and of his mind awaited him in Jerusalem. And if you're here and you're like, well, how is anything that was waiting for him in Jerusalem what he wanted? How is that the desires of his heart? Nobody wants death. Nobody wants loneliness. Nobody wants to be backstabbed. Nobody wants to find public humiliation and mocking and spitting and punching. Nobody wants that. So how was the desire of his heart waiting for him in Jerusalem? Because do you know what was waiting for him in Jerusalem? The will of God. And that was the desire of his heart. The desire of Jesus' heart. What makes him rugged is it said that above everything else, my desire is to follow the will of God, to be found in connection, in step with the place that my Father has called me to be. That is what led him there. And I just wonder maybe if this morning we could respond to Jesus by saying this: Jesus, I will resolutely set my face on you for all that you have done, for everything that you have done for me, for every way that you've saved me, you've rescued me, you pulled me out of the pit, you've set my life on solid ground. Because of all of those things, Jesus, I will resolutely, because you are the desire of my mind and my heart, I will resolutely set my face to you, and that is where I will walk no matter where it takes me. No matter what I face publicly, no matter what I face in the chaos, no matter what I face physically, I will set my face on you and on you alone. There's a story from last summer, actually, that was pretty fascinating for us because it hit home. Last summer, there was a story about a girl. Her name's Lulu Gribben. Some of you followed this story. Lulu is a teenager. She lives in Birmingham, Alabama, and she actually goes to the high school that I graduated from, Mountain Brook High School. She and her twin sister and her mom went to the beach last summer with some other friends down in Florida. They go to the beach and they're hanging out down there. And one day, Lulu and her twin sister and her friend, they go out into the ocean and they began to look for they're playing around, looking for sand dollars and starfish and these types of things. And as they're out there, this moment of trauma and chaos begins to happen. Lulu notices that there's a shadow in the water. Now, earlier that day, about 60 miles from where they were, there was a shark attack, and they didn't know about it at the time, but it was a bull shark, and a bull shark had made its way into shallow waters where Lulu was, and before long, Lulu finds herself in a fight with a shark. She gets under shark attack, she suffers wounds, and she gets dragged out of the water by her twin sister and her best friend. Paramedics rush to the scene, they grab her, they put her in an ambulance, and they rush her to the hospital. Lulu survives. She makes it. And she goes through countless surgeries to try to figure out how she's going to repair her body. The doctors decided that they had to amputate the arm from about the elbow down, and they had to amputate her leg right above the knee. Keep in mind, 16 years old, the entire life before her. She was a basketball player, golfer, big-time athlete, had her whole life in front of her. She was involved in all these school activities, all these things. And now all of a sudden, in an instant, everything about her life is totally different. Everything has changed. She goes to the hospital, she gets repaired, surgeries were successful, and then she begins this journey of rehabbing back as an amputee back into the real world, struggling through the physical moments of how do I do this? And here's the moment. She had two kind of decisions. One, either I'm going to quit because this is the worst and I don't know how to move on from this, or I'm going to live with purpose. I'm going to live pursuing something. And so here's what she decided. Lulu decides to live with purpose. She began a foundation called Lulu Strong. Lulu Strong is a foundation that is for amputees to have access to the most updated technology that amputees, whether it's different prosthetics or different things that are used for an amputee, but that's one of the things that she's working on. The other thing she's working on is a law called Lulu's Law that's like an Amber Alert system for those that are on the beach if sharks are seen or if somebody has suffered a shark bite. And she's working with federal groups to be able to kind of use the same technology as Amber Alert to update people that are on the beach, that are in that proximity. Hey, there's been a shark attack in the area, and it would allow you to get out of the water. She's living with purpose. She was recently, though, on Good Morning America, and Michael Strahan interviewed her. And I want to show you a clip of her interview because I think what she says in it is fascinating, related to her feelings throughout throughout the case of her experience, but also kind of the purpose that she lives with. All right, take a look.
Did you realize the severity of what you were going through?
I knew my life was on the line. So I was just grateful that they could extubate me and that I could breathe on my own. And I was just grateful that I got to wake up that morning.
Lulu, where do you think your strength comes from?
I think knowing that I have a large support system behind me and just continuing to get better not only for myself but for them and just show them that anything is possible. And then just knowing that God decided to save me, and so just showing him that he performed a miracle on the right person.
Two things that she says, right? One, she said she woke up the next morning and she was grateful. And man, can you imagine? Like, instead of being angry at God, instead of cursing him and being like, God, how dare you? God, how could you? God, why would you? What did it say? She woke up, she was grateful. She was grateful that she could breathe, grateful that she could experience another day. But the second thing, and I love the way that she says this, at the very end, she says this. She says, I want God to know, right, that he chose to perform a miracle on the right person. Man, what a testimony. That's purpose. To say, God, you saved my life, therefore I will live to show you, to prove to you that the miracle you've performed in my life was on the right person. Can I say this to all of us in this room this morning? You are a walking miracle. Every single one of you has received a miracle from God. The fact that you woke up out of bed this morning is a miracle. The fact that you get to breathe all day is a miracle. The fact that for those of you who are believers, God has pulled you out of the pit and rescued your life, taken you from the kingdom of darkness to the kingdom of light, you are a miracle. It is a miracle that those things have happened. Man, as we set our face on Jesus, could we just live like Jesus performed a miracle on the right person? Could we honor him in that way? I'll close with this. Lulu is not the picture of what we would deem as rugged. We don't put pictures of 16-year-old girls and we're like, rugged. That's not the way it looks. But can I say this morning? Lulu is more rugged than many, many people that you will meet in your life. Not because of what she's endured physically, but because of the way that her mind in the midst of her calamity and her trauma and her struggle said, I will chase showing God, living a life that would be in line with him, setting my face on showing God and allowing God to know that he chose the right person for a miracle, that my life will now be a response to everything that he has done. We're gonna sing a song to close called I Have Decided to Follow Jesus. It is a simple song. It is an older song. It's a song that some of you grew up maybe singing. But the idea behind it is that today, my choice is that's where I'm walking. In obedience, in the midst of my struggle, in the midst of my chaos, in the midst of the crowd, whatever it is, I am deciding to follow Jesus. The world behind me, the cross before me, that's what I'm chasing. I'm not worried about the world. I'm worried about the cross. I'm following in obedience to the things of Jesus. Though none go with me, I will follow Jesus. It might be lonely. You might walk this path by yourself, but I will choose, regardless of the circumstances of my life, to follow Jesus. As we sing this, would you declare, would you dedicate yourself this morning? Whether you know Jesus for a long time, you have known him, or whether you have never given your life to Jesus, would today be the day that you say, I have decided to follow Jesus?